We're going to see America likely continue to flex its interests towards South Africa. And I do have a concern that there is going to be ongoing negative reactions to that, which is going to lead to a dialing up of that pressure, which could lead to a dialing up of negative reactions.
We can rail against the reality of what Donald Trump is doing in Washington. That doesn't change the reality itself.
Yeah.
We need to choose our response. And I think particularly the erstwhile opposition are missing a huge opportunity here to leverage that global attention to their advantage. You know, pushing back against things like expropriation without compensation. Our organizations are doing that through litigation and other efforts.
Yeah.
But the political response needs to be there as well.
Yeah, if I could quickly just say on this, it's almost like this, it's like we're still living in the delusion of the triumph of like moral politic over realpolitik. You know, you know, the American president might offend our sensibilities, you know, or we tell ourselves a particular story about the world, and the story we've told ourselves about the world is that we actually all get along, and all our differences are imaginary, and we just you know, we have this this wonderful constitutional democracy to mediate all these things, and it's the best constitution in the world, and all this kind of stuff. And realpolitik comes along and says, actually, we've got real interests. The world is the world map is a map of real competing interests, and even within South Africa, it's a map of competing interests. We don't just accept not being issued a license to operate because of the color of our skin. That's directly against someone's vital economic interests. That's internal sanctions. That's internal economic warfare.
It's not just red tape that kind of slows you down and makes you.
No, I mean, it's fascinating. You know, people complaining about AGOA, that it might be withdrawn. You know, that the Trump administration could be so diabolical as to kind of withdraw this. Firstly, you know, as if South Africa is a paragon of free trade. I mean, we are not. The Department of Trade and Industry runs a labyrinthine kind of tariff system. Okay, and it's
through ITAC and other.
Yeah, and it's all based on kind of, you know, some spreadsheet that they've got there, and it's central planning deluxe. It's number one. Number two, we run economic sanctions internally in this country. We have internal economic sanctions. That is what BEE is. It's a denying of trade opportunities on the basis of some metric. And the withholding of licensing that we're seeing in the third wave of BEE is the most extreme form of those sanctions. So the ironies here kind of present themselves. You know, there's this sense of, oh, you know, how could we be sanctioned, and how could we have these privileges withdrawn? When that's precisely what's going on internally, and precisely the policies that the Americans are looking at and saying, fix that, and then there won't be a problem, you know? And this is supposedly now an attack on sovereignty and so on. No, this is called international relations, and it's time to get real.
Yeah, I mean, I think a very good example of the response, the Minister of Minerals and Mining, Gwede Mantashe, he said, well, if America's going to play this game, we're going to withhold our minerals. But it's not really his minerals to withhold. I mean, it's private capital that would be bearing the burden of that. And also, we've undermined our own national interest. The best form of foreign policy is domestic policy, a strong domestic policy. And so through second wave BEE and now the third wave, we've put all of these regulatory burdens on miners to the extent that it's no longer profitable to do business in this country.
Ironically, David, that makes the threat of withholding minerals less potent than it was 30 years ago, because our mineral output in this country has absolutely plummeted down global rankings. You know, barring one or two kind of niche, you know, metals that we have in relative abundance here, you can get your minerals from many other suppliers. But even more basic than that, withholding minerals, I mean, that doesn't benefit us. We turn minerals into foreign currency, and then we turn that foreign currency into appliances, goods, services,
That we then import, yeah.
supplies for manufacturing industries and medical technology industries, and so we need to be selling our minerals, and we need to be selling them to good partners at good prices, and that's what mature kind of statesmanship would actually look like. Now, we don't seem to have that at the moment. We don't seem to have a sense of mature statesmanship in relation to these sorts of threats, and that's concerning to me, because you're going to see America likely continue to flex its interests towards South Africa, and I do have a concern that there is going to be ongoing negative reactions to that, which is going to lead to a dialing up of that pressure, which could lead to a dialing up of negative reactions. And I can't say exactly where that's going to end and how that's going to go. That's a very complex dynamic. But I have seen several examples of countries around the world where America or the West has dialed up sanctions, and there's actually been a very negative response, and that kind of can actually spiral into bad places, where there's a doubling down on both sides, and you get this kind of real sort of calcification of positions that could make our jobs tricky domestically. My feeling is that, at least for now, this is leading to a ramping up of pressure and a kind of an escalation of policy threats domestically. There might be a release valve for that at some point. Maybe the pressure gets dialed up enough from foreign dynamics to kind of cause a backing down. But I think that the work that we do, the work that you guys do, really is becoming incredibly and increasingly crucial in this time, because we do face a risk that a threatened government that's had no real bright light shone on it for very long reacts negatively and turns this country into its kind of own sort of personal harvesting fiefdom, actually doubles down on the policies and goes, well, okay, if we're going to get punished for BEE and we're going to lose this kind of access and it's done, let's just double down then. Let's go all in on that.
Because what's the end game? Because we've seen countries like Zimbabwe, Venezuela go down this confiscatory socialist path, and they get isolated as a consequence, sanctions, etc.
And then it feeds on itself.
But it doesn't exactly create an environment for a flourishing of liberty.
Certainly not.
And those regimes turn inward and start to attack their opponents.
In both those examples, and someone can nitpick that there are differences between South Africa and those countries, and that's certainly true. There are some institutional differences, and not everything's exactly the same. But in those two examples, you saw an incredibly negative response to that harsh reaction. Now, the counter to that might be, well, we're still going to put the harsh pressure on because we disagree with what you're doing. And let's not forget that it started with Chavez's socialism, his undermining of property rights, his nationalizations, his confiscations. Let's not forget that that's where it started. But where it can end is hyperinflation and total collapse, and we're not there. But this is precisely why this is the time for serious diplomatic efforts, both state to state, non-state to non-state, and non-state to state. Decentralized diplomacy is very much the order of the day.
Yeah, I think so.